There is a reason, and almost nobody sees it. The conversation ended hours ago, maybe even days ago, but somehow, you are still inside it. You remember the exact expression on their face, the pause before they answered, the sentence you wish you had phrased differently, the joke that suddenly doesn't seem as funny anymore. And then the questions begin. Did I say too much? Did that sound stupid? Why did they look at me like that? Should I have said something else? What if they misunderstood me? Nothing is happening anymore. The room is gone. The person is gone. The conversation is over. Yet your mind refuses to leave, so you replay it again and again, changing small details each time, imagining better answers, searching for hidden meanings, trying to determine whether something went wrong. Most people call this overthinking, but psychology suggests something deeper may be happening. Because if you were simply thinking about the conversation, why does your mind keep returning to the same moments? Why does one harmless sentence suddenly feel dangerous at midnight? And why are you searching for a mistake when nobody has even told you that you made one? Perhaps you are not replaying the conversation because you want to understand what happened. Perhaps you are replaying it because some part of you is trying to discover whether you are still safe. That changes everything. The human brain is remarkably sensitive to social information. For most of human history, belonging was not merely emotionally pleasant, it was survival. To be accepted by the group meant protection, food, connection, safety. To be rejected could mean vulnerability. So the brain became extraordinarily good at detecting signals that might threaten belonging. A facial expression, a change in tone, a moment of silence, someone becoming slightly colder, someone looking away. Your conscious mind may barely notice these things, but another part of you does. And for some people, it notices everything. You walk away from a conversation, and the investigation begins. Why did they pause when I said that? Their voice changed. Maybe I offended them. Maybe they think I'm annoying. Notice what your mind is doing. It is not remembering. It is scanning, looking backward for evidence of danger. And perhaps this habit began long before you ever noticed it. Imagine growing up in an environment where people's emotions were unpredictable. One day, everything was peaceful. The next, someone was angry. Maybe you learned to study footsteps, facial expressions, the way a door closed, the sound of someone's voice when they came home. You became good at reading the room because reading the room helped you prepare. Or perhaps mistakes were embarrassing. You were corrected harshly, teased, compared, made to feel foolish for saying the wrong thing. So your mind learned another rule. Think carefully before you speak. At first, that rule may have protected you, but eventually, it became something else. You began thinking carefully after you spoke too. Rechecking, reanalyzing, searching for anything that could later become rejection. This is why conversation replay can feel impossible to control. You are not simply remembering words, you are performing an emotional safety inspection. And the mind believes that if it analyzes the interaction thoroughly enough, it can prevent future pain. If you discover exactly what you did wrong, perhaps you can avoid doing it again. If you understand exactly what they meant, perhaps you can predict what happens next. If you rehearse enough alternative responses, perhaps you will never be caught unprepared again. It creates the illusion of control. But there is a problem. Human interaction is ambiguous. People pause for thousands of reasons. They become quiet because they are tired, distracted, hungry, anxious, thinking about something completely unrelated to you. But an anxious mind dislikes ambiguity. It wants an answer. And when no answer exists, it often creates one. Usually the answer that hurts the most. I embarrassed myself. They don't like me. I was too much. I shouldn't have said that. Have you noticed how rarely your mind concludes, that conversation was probably fine? Why does uncertainty so often become self-blame? Because blaming yourself gives the mind something it can control. If the problem was you, then perhaps you can change. Speak less. Be funnier. Be calmer. Be smarter. Reveal less. Need less. Become easier to accept. And suddenly, a conversation becomes an evaluation of your worth. This is why you may remember your awkward moments far more vividly than anyone else's. You assume other people are replaying them too, but most of them are busy replaying their own. The sentence keeping you awake may have already disappeared from the other person's memory. Yet your mind treats it like evidence in a trial, and you are both the defendant and the prosecutor. You remember everything you said incorrectly, while forgetting everything that went naturally. You magnify the 3 seconds that felt awkward, and erase the 30 minutes that felt completely normal. This is not objective analysis. It is threat detection. And perhaps the most exhausting part is that the mind never announces when the investigation is finished. There is always another interpretation, another possibility, another version of what you should have said. So you keep searching, not because the answer is hidden, but because certainty is impossible. And the more you replay the conversation, the more significant it begins to feel. A small, awkward moment becomes humiliation. A neutral expression becomes rejection. A delayed reply becomes proof. Until eventually, you are no longer reacting to what actually happened. You are reacting to the story your mind created afterward. But why does your mind almost always make you the problem? And why can the fear of saying the wrong thing become so powerful that eventually you stop saying what you really think at all? Because eventually, you don't just replay conversations after they happen. You begin editing yourself while they are happening. You are talking to someone, but part of your attention is somewhere else, watching yourself, monitoring your tone, measuring your words, checking their face. Am I talking too much? Was that funny? Do they look bored? Should I stop? Did I just make this awkward? And suddenly, you are no longer fully inside the conversation. You are observing yourself having it. This is one of the hidden costs of chronic self-consciousness. You become both the person living the moment and the person evaluating it. Imagine trying to dance while constantly watching your feet. Eventually, the movement becomes unnatural. Conversation works the same way. The more intensely you monitor yourself, the harder spontaneity becomes. You hesitate. You rewrite sentences before speaking. You hide opinions. You soften statements you actually believe. Sometimes you begin a sentence, then abandon it halfway through because you suddenly worry it sounds stupid. And afterward, you replay that too. Why couldn't I just speak normally? But perhaps the problem was never that you didn't know how to speak. Perhaps you were trying to speak, while simultaneously protecting yourself from judgment. Those are two very different tasks. And this is where something deeper begins to emerge. You may think you are afraid of saying the wrong thing, but often, you are afraid of what saying the wrong thing might mean about you. What if they think you're unintelligent, needy, boring, strange, desperate, too emotional, too quiet, too much? Notice how quickly one sentence becomes identity. You don't think that joke didn't land. You think, I'm embarrassing. You don't think, I explained that badly. You think, I sound stupid. You don't think, they disagreed with me. You think, maybe there's something wrong with me. This is why replaying conversations can become so emotionally exhausting. You aren't reviewing an interaction. You are reviewing yourself, and every memory becomes evidence. Evidence for whether you are acceptable, interesting, intelligent, lovable, normal, safe from rejection. So naturally, your mind takes the investigation seriously. But where did it learn that one imperfect interaction could reveal so much about your worth? Sometimes, the answer begins with shame. Shame is different from guilt. Guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, something is wrong with me. And when shame becomes deeply rooted, ordinary social mistakes become strangely threatening. Mispronounce a word, and you feel exposed. Tell a story nobody reacts to, and you want to disappear. Send a message that feels too enthusiastic, and suddenly you regret revealing that you cared. Open up emotionally, and hours later you wish you could take every word back. This last experience is particularly revealing. Have you ever had a conversation where you felt completely comfortable? You opened up. You shared something personal. Perhaps the other person listened. Nothing obviously went wrong. Then later, the discomfort arrived. Why did I tell them that? They probably think I'm pathetic. I should have kept that to myself. The conversation was safe, but being seen was not. This is sometimes called a vulnerability hangover. The emotional exposure feels manageable while connection is present. But once you are alone, your protective mind begins examining what you revealed, because intimacy requires something overthinking hates. Uncertainty. You cannot completely control what another person thinks of you. You cannot enter their mind and verify their interpretation. You cannot guarantee that they will never use what you shared against you. You cannot make yourself perfectly understood. So your mind tries the next best thing, replay everything. Maybe somewhere inside the memory, certainty can be found, but it never is, because another person's mind is inaccessible, and this creates an uncomfortable truth. The problem may not be that you think too much. The problem may be that you are trying to solve something thinking cannot solve. You are trying to guarantee acceptance, and no amount of analysis can do that. You can choose your words carefully and still be misunderstood. You can be kind, and someone can still dislike you. You can explain yourself perfectly, and someone can still interpret you through their own experiences. You can do absolutely nothing wrong and still experience rejection. For a mind that learns safety through control, this is terrifying. So it creates rituals, rereading messages, checking whether someone has responded, reconstructing conversations, asking friends, "Do you think I sounded weird?" Searching for reassurance, and reassurance works. For a moment, someone says, "You're overthinking. You were fine." Relief. Your body relaxes, the threat disappears. But then another conversation happens, another uncertain expression, another delayed response. And you need reassurance again. Because reassurance answered the question, but it never challenged the belief underneath it. The belief that you must know what everyone thinks of you in order to feel safe. And perhaps this is why the replaying never truly satisfies you. Even when you decide the conversation probably went well, your mind adds, but what if they were pretending? What if they talked about me afterward? What if I missed something? What if they don't respond tomorrow? There is always another door for doubt to walk through. And eventually, you may begin protecting yourself before conversations even happen. You become quieter around certain people. You avoid expressing strong opinions. You wait for others to reveal themselves first. You mirror their energy, their humor, their interests, their level of vulnerability. You become extraordinarily adaptable, and people may even like you for it. But afterward, another question appears. Did they actually like me? Or did they like the version of me I created for them? That is the cruel paradox. The more you edit yourself to avoid rejection, the less secure acceptance feels. Because deep down, you know they haven't fully met you. So you monitor even more, adjust even more, replay even more, until conversation becomes performance and connection becomes evaluation. But there was a version of you before all of this, a version who spoke before calculating every possible interpretation, a version who laughed without wondering how the laugh sounded, a version who asked questions without fearing they were stupid, a version who existed without constantly watching themselves exist. Maybe you barely remember that person, or maybe you only meet them around the few people who make you feel completely safe. Notice what happens around those people. You don't rehearse as much. You don't inspect every silence. You don't go home and replay every sentence. Why? Did you suddenly become better at conversation? No. You stopped expecting punishment. That tells us something important. Your overthinking may not be evidence that you are socially incapable. It may be evidence that some part of you is still expecting judgment. And perhaps the question is no longer, how do I stop thinking about what I said? Perhaps the real question is, why do I believe one imperfect sentence could make me unworthy of being accepted? And perhaps that is the question beneath all of it. Not, why do I overthink everything I say? But, why does being misunderstood feel so dangerous to me? Because once you understand that, the replaying begins to make sense. You are not simply obsessed with conversations, you are trying to protect an identity. The identity of being acceptable, being intelligent enough, interesting enough, careful enough, good enough. You believe that if you can manage how people perceive you, you can protect yourself from rejection. So after every interaction, your mind conducts an inspection. Did I reveal too much? Did I appear weak? Did I talk too long? Did I seem desperate? Did I make myself look foolish? And underneath every question is the same fear. Did I give them a reason not to want me? But there is something your mind has forgotten. Connection was never supposed to require perfection. Think about the people you love. Have they always spoken perfectly? Have they never told an awkward story? Never misunderstood something? Never talked too much? Never sent an embarrassing message? Never said something they later regretted? Of course they have. And yet, you did not reduce their entire worth to that moment. So why do you believe everyone else is doing that to you? Perhaps because you experience yourself differently. You live inside your mistakes. Other people's awkward moments pass through your awareness and disappear. Yours follow you home. You remember them in the shower, in bed, while driving. Months later, sometimes years later, your mind suddenly retrieves something embarrassing you said, and your entire body reacts as though it happened 5 minutes ago. But memory is deceptive. The fact that something remains vivid to you does not mean it remains important to anyone else. Sometimes the memory survived because of the emotion attached to it, not because the event itself mattered. Your brain marked it. Remember this. Don't let this happen again. And every replay strengthens the warning. Until eventually, you are carrying a museum of moments nobody else remembers. A facial expression from 6 years ago. A strange joke from school. A message you wish you hadn't sent. A sentence you phrased badly. Small moments, preserved because shame convinced your mind they were important. And perhaps they never were. What would happen if you stopped reopening them, not forcing yourself to forget, not pretending you never feel embarrassed, but refusing to turn every uncomfortable memory into evidence against yourself? Imagine remembering something awkward, and instead of beginning the investigation, you simply think, yes, that was awkward, and then nothing. No trial, no punishment, no reconstruction, no attempt to travel backward and become a more acceptable version of yourself. Just acknowledgement. That sounds simple. But for someone who has spent years monitoring themselves, it can feel radical, because you are allowing yourself to be imperfect without immediately correcting your identity. You are learning that embarrassment can exist without becoming shame, that uncertainty can exist without becoming danger, that another person's opinion can exist without becoming your definition. And slowly, the mind learns something new. Not every conversation requires investigation. Not every silence contains hidden meaning. Not every facial expression is about you. Not every delayed response is rejection. Not every awkward moment needs repair. And most importantly, not everyone needs to understand you. That last one may be the hardest. Because perhaps you have spent years trying to become impossible to misunderstand. You explain your intentions, clarify your words, add another message, soften your boundaries, rewrite your sentences. You want people to know, I'm not rude, I'm not stupid, I'm not needy, I'm not difficult, I'm not a bad person. But there will always be someone who interprets you incorrectly. No amount of perfection can prevent that. People do not see you objectively. They see you through themselves, through their history, their fears, their expectations, their insecurities, their mood that day, their assumptions. You can spend your entire life trying to control those interpretations and still fail. So perhaps peace does not come from finally controlling what everyone thinks. Perhaps peace comes from realizing you were never supposed to. And something changes when you stop making every interaction a referendum on your worth. Conversation becomes conversation again. Not an examination, not a performance, not an audition for acceptance. You begin listening instead of monitoring yourself. You laugh before deciding whether the laugh sounds right. You tell the story without editing every sentence. You allow pauses. You allow disagreement. You allow yourself to occasionally say something stupid, and when you walk away, the mind may still begin. Why did you say? But now, you recognize the voice. You know what it is trying to do. It is trying to protect you. So instead of fighting it, you can ask, is there actually a problem here? Or am I searching for one? Sometimes there will be something worth reflecting on. Perhaps you genuinely hurt someone. Perhaps you spoke unfairly. Perhaps you crossed a boundary. Then reflection has a purpose. You acknowledge it. You repair what needs repairing. You learn, and you move forward. But healthy reflection eventually ends. Rumination does not. Reflection asks, what can I learn? Rumination asks, what does this prove is wrong with me? One leads somewhere. The other walks in circles. And maybe you have been walking those circles for years, trying to arrive at a version of yourself who never says the wrong thing, who never feels embarrassed, who is never misunderstood, who is universally liked. But that person does not exist, and trying to become them may be costing you something far more valuable than approval, your ability to be present. Because while you are replaying yesterday's conversation, today is happening without you. Another room, another person, another opportunity to connect. And if you enter every new interaction carrying the autopsy of the last one, you never truly arrive. So perhaps the goal is not to become someone who never thinks about what they said, Perhaps the goal is to stop treating every thought as a problem that requires an answer. A memory appears. You notice it. The familiar embarrassment rises, and instead of following it down the same corridor, you let the door remain closed because you finally understand something. The conversation ended. You are the one who kept it alive. Not because you were weak, not because you were broken, but because somewhere inside you, a part of your mind believed that replaying the past could protect you from rejection in the future. It was trying to keep you safe. But safety purchased through constant self-surveillance eventually becomes another kind of prison. And perhaps freedom begins with accepting something beautifully uncomfortable. You will sometimes say too much. You will sometimes say too little. You will occasionally be awkward, someone will misunderstand you, someone may even dislike you, and still, you will be okay. Because your worth was never hiding inside somebody else's interpretation of one conversation. So tonight, if your mind brings one back, the sentence, the expression, the pause, the thing you wish you had said differently, remember this. You do not have to solve it again. You do not have to rewrite it. You do not have to punish yourself until the memory finally feels safe. The conversation is over. Maybe you are allowed to leave it too.